The moment I stepped through those double doors, I knew something was terribly wrong. The reception hall fell into an eerie hush, like someone had pressed pause on a movie. Nathan stood near the altar, his hand frozen mid-gesture, his eyes locked on me with something between shock and panic. My mother sat at the front table, her champagne glass halfway to her lips, wearing that proud smirk I'd seen 1,000 times before. Beside her, my stepfather leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking like he'd just won a bet. The bride, Amanda, turned slowly, her white dress catching the chandelier light as she looked me up and down with barely concealed triumph. Then Nathan's voice cut through the silence. "Everyone, thank you for coming, even Chloe made it." Forced laughter rippled through the crowd, hollow and rehearsed. My cousin Sarah sat 3 tables back, whispering loudly enough for me to hear. "They didn't think you'd come." My mother leaned toward me as I passed, her perfume overwhelming, her whisper sharp as glass. "Just try not to cause a scene today, sweetheart." The humiliation should have crushed me. Instead, I straightened my spine, letting my fingers brush the emerald fabric of my dress. The room went silent again, but this time it was different. This time, they were staring because they couldn't look away. "My name is Chloe Williams, and I've spent my entire life being underestimated by the people who were supposed to protect me. Growing up, I was always the problem child, too emotional, too dramatic, too sensitive. My brother could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. He could fail 3 classes and still get praised for trying. I could bring home straight A's and hear about how grades weren't everything. When I was 16, I overheard my mother telling her sister that I wasn't the type men settled down with. "Too intense," she said, like it was a disease. My stepfather agreed, adding that I needed to learn my place. Nathan entered my life when I was 23, fresh out of college and desperate to prove everyone wrong. He was charming in public, the kind of man who opened doors and remembered birthdays. My family loved him immediately. Finally, my mother said, someone who could handle me. But behind closed doors, Nathan was different. He'd dismiss my opinions mid-sentence, check his phone when I talked about my day, tell me I was overreacting when something hurt my feelings. When I tried to explain how small he made me feel, he'd sigh and say I was being dramatic. Just like my mother always said. I spent 2 years trying to be less needy, less emotional, less myself. It still wasn't enough. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped between bills and grocery store coupons. My mother's handwriting was unmistakable on the envelope, precise, controlled, a little too perfect. I stood in my kitchen, the paper trembling in my hands as I read Nathan's name embossed in gold letters. He was marrying Amanda, a woman I'd met exactly twice during our relationship. Both times, she'd been overly friendly, touching his arm just a little too long, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. I'd mentioned it once, and Nathan had called me paranoid. The memory that came flooding back hit me like a punch to the stomach. 6 months before our breakup, I'd borrowed Nathan's laptop to print a document. A message notification had popped up, from Sarah, my cousin. The preview showed enough, "Can't wait for this weekend. Don't tell Chloe." My hands had shaken as I scrolled through months of flirty messages, inside jokes, plans made behind my back. When I confronted Nathan, he'd laughed it off. "We're just friends, Chloe. You're imagining things." When I showed my mother the messages, she'd sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Sarah would never." Now, holding this invitation, I understood. The humiliation wasn't accidental. It was premeditated, carefully orchestrated, and my own family had helped design it. I sat in my therapist's office 3 days later, the invitation spread out on the coffee table between us like evidence at a crime scene. Dr. Patterson had been seeing me for 8 months, ever since the breakup had left me struggling to get out of bed most mornings. She studied the invitation, then looked at me with those calm, assessing eyes. "What do you want to do about this?" she asked. I'd been asking myself the same question for 72 hours straight. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, to prove I'd moved on. Another part wanted to show up and scream the truth in front of everyone. Dr. Patterson leaned forward slightly. Chloe, you've spent your entire life letting other people define who you are. Your mother decided you were too emotional. Nathan decided you were too demanding. Your family decided you were the problem. She paused, letting her words settle. You can either let them continue writing your story, or you can redefine yourself entirely. But understand this, if you go to that wedding, you need to go as the woman you're becoming, not the woman they expect to see. I sat back, feeling something shift inside my chest. For the first time since receiving that invitation, I didn't feel powerless. I felt something else entirely. I felt determined. I'm going, I said quietly. But not as the girl they remember. I stood in front of my closet the following Saturday, staring at rows of safe, forgettable dresses. Beiges and blacks, modest cuts, nothing that drew attention. These were the clothes I'd worn trying to disappear, trying to be less. I pulled them out one by one, tossing them onto my bed in a growing pile of everything I was leaving behind. At the back of my closet, still wrapped in protective plastic, hung a dress I'd bought 2 years ago for a work event I'd never attended. Nathan had seen it and said it was too much, too attention-seeking. I'd agreed because agreeing was easier than fighting. Now, I pulled it free from its plastic prison. The emerald fabric caught the afternoon light, shimmering like water. It had a fitted bodice that hugged every curve, a neckline that was elegant without being revealing, and a flowing skirt that moved like liquid when I walked. I held it up to myself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. This wasn't armor in the traditional sense. It wasn't protection. It was a statement. It said I existed, I mattered, and I refused to shrink anymore. This is it, I whispered to my reflection. The dress would speak volumes without me saying a single word. It would communicate strength, confidence, and an unshakable sense of self-worth that no one could take from me again. The gym became my sanctuary over the next 3 weeks. Every morning at 6, I was there, pushing my body past its limits. It wasn't about losing weight or fitting some impossible standard. It was about reclaiming strength I'd let others convince me I didn't have. I started with simple workouts, treadmill sessions where I could lose myself in music, weightlifting that made my muscles burn and reminded me I was stronger than I thought. After each session, I'd spend 20 minutes meditating in the corner, focusing on my breathing, letting go of years of accumulated pain. One morning, someone called my name. I looked up to see Jessica, a friend from college I hadn't seen in 4 years. We'd lost touch after I'd started dating Nathan, slowly cutting ties with anyone he didn't approve of. Chloe? Oh my God, I almost didn't recognize you. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like vanilla and brought back memories of late-night study sessions and laughter. We grabbed coffee after our workout, and I found myself telling her everything. She listened without judgment, without dismissing my feelings, without telling me I was overreacting. That family of yours sounds toxic as hell, she said finally. But look at you now. You're glowing. I realized she was right. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Strong, capable, worthy, all the things Nathan and my family had tried to convince me I wasn't. 2 weeks before the wedding, I overheard a conversation at work that made everything click into place. I was in the break room making coffee when 2 colleagues walked in, not realizing I was behind the partition. "Did you hear about Nathan Parker?" one of them said. My hand froze on the coffee pot. "Yeah, he's getting married. To Amanda Chan, right? That whole situation is wild. I heard he's been telling everyone that his ex will probably show up and make a scene. Like he's expecting some big dramatic meltdown." They laughed, and I felt my jaw tighten. Typical guy with an ego problem. Probably wants his ex there just to prove he won somehow. After they left, I stood there processing what I'd heard. This entire wedding wasn't about love or commitment. It was about Nathan's need to prove something, to himself, to our friends, to me. He wanted me there to witness his victory, to see what I'd supposedly lost. The realization should have hurt. Instead, I felt something else entirely. I felt a smile creeping across my face. Nathan had always underestimated me, had always seen me as weak and overly emotional. He was expecting the old Chloe, the one who cried and begged and broke down. He had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and texted my RSVP to the wedding coordinator, "I'll be there." One guest. I can't wait. The dress fitting happened on a Thursday afternoon. I'd scheduled it during my lunch break, sneaking away from the office like I was committing a beautiful crime. The boutique was small and exclusive, the kind of place where they served champagne and treated you like royalty. The sales assistant helped me into the emerald dress, carefully zipping up the back while I stared at myself in the three-way mirror. When she stepped back, I couldn't breathe for a moment. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. She stood tall, shoulders back, chin raised. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, the emerald fabric making her skin glow. Her eyes were clear and determined, not clouded with self-doubt. Tears pricked at my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pride, of recognition, of finally seeing myself the way I deserved to be seen. "You look absolutely stunning," the assistant whispered, her own eyes a little misty. I turned slowly, watching the skirt flow around my legs. Every movement was graceful, powerful, impossible to ignore. This was who I was meant to be all along. Someone who took up space unapologetically, who refused to dim her light for anyone else's comfort. "I'll take it," I said, my voice steady and sure. As I changed back into my work clothes, I caught one last glimpse of myself in that dress. The old Chloe was gone. In her place stood someone Nathan and my family would never be able to dismiss again. My mother called that evening, her voice dripping with false concern. I was cooking dinner, stirring pasta sauce when her name lit up my phone screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. "Chloe, sweetheart, I wanted to check in about the wedding." She paused, waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. "Are you absolutely sure you want to go? It might be, well, awkward for you. Seeing Nathan move on and everything." I gripped the phone tighter, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I'm going, Mom. I already confirmed." Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear her recalculating, trying to figure out my angle. "Well, I just think it might be easier for everyone if you maybe reconsidered. You know how you can be sometimes, getting emotional and making things about yourself." There it was. The subtle dig, the reminder that I was the problem. I'd heard variations of this my entire life, and it used to work. Used to make me second-guess myself, shrink back, apologize for existing. Not anymore. "I'll be fine, Mom. Actually, I have plans with friends afterward, so I won't stay long." That last part was improvised, but saying it out loud made it feel real, made it feel like I had a whole life outside their toxic circle. Because I did. My mother made a small humph sound, clearly unsatisfied with my response. We said our goodbyes, and I immediately texted Jessica and 2 other friends, "Dinner after the wedding? I need backup and good company." All 3 responded within minutes. "We got you." The warning came from an unexpected source. I was at the grocery store, comparing prices on coffee beans, when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned to find Melissa, one of Amanda's bridesmaids. We'd met briefly at a party years ago. "Chloe? I thought that was you." She glanced around nervously, like she was checking for witnesses. "Listen, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I think you should know." My stomach tightened. "Know what?" "Nathan's been talking. A lot. He really wants you at this wedding." She shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable. "He keeps saying he wants you there to see that he won, that he got the better woman, that you'll realize what you lost." The words should have stung. Instead, they clarified everything. This wasn't paranoia or insecurity. This was confirmation. He actually said those words? That he won? Melissa nodded. Look, Amanda's my friend, but what he's doing is cruel. I just thought you deserved to know what you're walking into. I thanked her, and she hurried away, probably regretting her moment of conscience. I stood there in the coffee aisle, processing this information. Nathan had always been competitive, had always needed to feel superior. Our entire relationship had been about him winning arguments, being right, proving his point. Now I understood the full picture. He didn't want me at this wedding because he'd moved on. He wanted me there because he needed an audience for his victory lap. The realization settled over me like calm before a storm. Fine. I'd give him his audience. But the show wasn't going to go the way he'd planned. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect, cruel sunshine. I woke up at 7, my stomach a tangle of nerves and determination. I spent an hour getting ready, taking my time with makeup, hair, every detail precise and intentional. The drive to the venue took 40 minutes. I spent every mile reviewing my strategy. Stay calm, stay composed, don't engage with provocation. Let my presence speak for itself. The wedding was at an estate outside the city, all manicured lawns and fountains, the kind of place that cost more than most people's annual salary. Nathan had always loved expensive things, loved the image of success even when his bank account told a different story. I pulled into the parking lot and sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I could see guests arriving, women in pastel dresses, men in suits, everyone playing their part in Nathan's perfect day. Every betrayal flashed through my mind. Nathan dismissing my feelings, my mother choosing everyone over me, Sarah's secret messages, years of being told I was too much and not enough all at once. Then I thought about Dr. Patterson's words, you can redefine yourself. I thought about Jessica's hug, the dress waiting in my garment bag, the woman I'd become over these past months. I was ready. I stepped out of the car, emerald dress flowing around me, and walked toward those double doors with my head held high. The moment I entered, the room transformed. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned like dominoes falling. I felt every eye on me, tracking my movement across the polished marble floor. Nathan stood near the altar, his confident smile frozen on his face. Beside him, Amanda's expression shifted from confused to threatened in the span of a heartbeat. My mother's champagne glass stopped halfway to her mouth, her eyes wide with something that looked almost like fear. I walked slowly, deliberately, letting them see exactly who I'd become. The dress caught the chandelier light, shimmering with each step. I held my shoulders back, chin high, the picture of composure. Camera flashes popped, someone's aunt capturing the moment, not realizing they were documenting my quiet revolution. The whispers started immediately, rippling through the crowd like wind through grass. Who is that? Is that his ex-girlfriend? She looks incredible. I heard she was a mess after the breakup. Does she look like a mess to you? I felt Nathan's eyes burning into me, felt the weight of everyone's stares, felt my mother's barely controlled fury. And I smiled. Not a big smile, nothing dramatic or attention-seeking. Just a small, calm, knowing smile that said everything I needed to say. I existed. I mattered. I was untouchable. The room stayed silent for what felt like an eternity, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. I'd barely taken 3 steps when Sarah materialized beside me, her bridesmaid dress a shade of pink that didn't suit her. She leaned in close, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You think you look better than me? It was such a petty question, such an obvious attempt to get a reaction. The old Chloe would have taken the bait, would have defended herself or fired back with something equally cutting. The new Chloe simply looked at her cousin, really looked at her, and saw someone small and insecure, someone who needed to tear others down to feel tall. I smiled softly and nodded once, a gesture that acknowledged her existence without engaging her game. Then I moved past her, my dress swishing against her pink monstrosity. I heard her sharp intake of breath, the beginning of another comment that died when she realized I wasn't playing. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother lean toward Sarah, whispering urgently. Whatever they'd planned, whatever reaction they'd expected, I wasn't giving it to them. I was 3 steps ahead, calm and collected, completely in control. An older woman I didn't recognize touched my arm gently. "That's a beautiful dress, dear." "Thank you," I replied, my voice steady and gracious. The interaction was simple, meaningless to anyone watching. But to me, it was validation that I existed outside my family's narrative, that strangers could see me without their poisonous filter. I found my way toward the back of the reception area, choosing my position carefully. Not hiding, but not seeking attention either. Just present, visible, undeniable. I chose a seat at the back corner table, far enough from my family to breathe but positioned perfectly in Nathan's line of sight. It was strategic without being obvious. From here, I could watch everything while appearing casual and unbothered. The seating arrangement my mother had carefully orchestrated placed family members at the front tables, presumably so I'd feel excluded and ashamed in the back. She'd miscalculated badly. This position gave me power. The power to observe without being absorbed into their toxicity, the power to be seen on my own terms. I sat down gracefully, crossing my legs and letting my dress settle around me like water finding its level. An elderly couple at my table introduced themselves, tourists from out of state who barely knew the bride and groom. Perfect. No history, no judgment, no expectations. We made pleasant small talk about the weather and the venue. They asked what brought me here, and I said simply, I used to know the groom. They didn't pry, and I appreciated their kindness. Every few minutes, I felt eyes on me. Nathan glanced back repeatedly, his smile becoming more strained each time. My mother kept turning in her seat, trying to catch my eye, probably hoping to send some silent message of disapproval. I ignored her, focusing instead on the pleasant conversation with my tablemates. The elderly woman leaned toward me at one point and whispered, "You're the most elegant person here, dear. That dress is absolutely stunning." I thanked her warmly, feeling genuinely touched. Her compliment meant more than she could know, proof that I was visible, valued, real. The toast came after dinner, announced by the clink of silverware against crystal. Nathan stood, microphone in hand, his perfect smile plastered across his face. Amanda gazed up at him adoringly, playing her part in his carefully constructed narrative. "I want to thank everyone for being here today to celebrate this incredible moment," Nathan began, his voice carrying across the reception hall. He talked about love and commitment, about finding the right person, about how everything had fallen into place perfectly. Then his eyes found mine across the room. "You know, life has a funny way of showing you what you're meant to have." He paused for effect, and I knew what was coming. Sometimes you have to go through the wrong relationships to appreciate the right one. The guests murmured approval. My mother smiled smugly. Sarah giggled behind her hand. It was a subtle dig, barely noticeable to anyone who didn't know our history. But I knew. He was telling the room that I was the mistake, the wrong relationship, the thing he'd had to endure before finding his prize. I did exactly what they didn't expect. I raised my glass slowly, maintaining eye contact with Nathan across the crowded room. My smile was calm, serene even, completely unbothered by his petty attempt at humiliation. I took a sip of champagne, never breaking eye contact, my expression pleasant and composed. Nathan's smile faltered for just a second. His hand tightened on the microphone. The subtle sting of my complete indifference hit harder than any angry outburst could have. I excused myself to the restroom 20 minutes later, needing a moment to breathe away from all those watching eyes. The hallway was blessedly quiet, my heels clicking against marble as I walked toward the ornate bathroom at the end. That's when I heard them, my mother's voice and Sarah's, sharp and urgent, coming from around the corner near the coat check. I stopped, pressing myself against the wall. "She's not reacting the way she's supposed to," Sarah hissed. "She's just sitting there like she doesn't care." "I know." My mother's voice was tight with frustration. "We need to make sure she doesn't steal attention from Amanda. That dress is completely inappropriate. Should I say something to her?" Try to provoke her a little more? No, you tried that already and she just smiled at you like you were nothing. We need to be more subtle. Maybe have Thomas mention how well Nathan's doing financially, how much better he's treating Amanda. I listened to them plot, these women who were supposed to love me, and felt nothing but pity. They were so small, so consumed with tearing me down that they couldn't see their own desperation. Instead of panicking or getting upset, I catalogued their tactics mentally. I knew exactly what they were planning now, which meant I could stay 3 steps ahead. I waited until they moved away, then continued to the bathroom, my composure intact. When I looked in the mirror, I saw strength looking back at me. They couldn't touch me anymore. I wouldn't let them. The dance floor opened after the first dance, music filling the reception hall with upbeat energy. I stayed at my table, watching couples sway and laugh, perfectly content to observe rather than participate. Then Amanda appeared beside me, her white dress shimmering under the lights. Chloe, would you join us for a group dance? I'd love to have everyone participate. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes held challenge. I understood immediately, this was another test, another opportunity for them to watch me squirm or make a fool of myself. The old Chloe would have declined, would have hidden in the bathroom until the moment passed. The new Chloe stood up gracefully and said, "Of course." I followed Amanda onto the dance floor, very aware of every eye tracking my movement. The music shifted to something upbeat and fun, and the floor filled with guests. I moved with quiet confidence, letting the rhythm guide me without overthinking. My dress flowed beautifully with each movement, catching light and drawing eyes. I wasn't trying to be the center of attention, wasn't putting on a show. I was simply existing fully, unapologetically, taking up space without shame. An older gentleman, someone's uncle, smiled as he danced nearby. "You've got wonderful grace, young lady." People were watching, but not with judgment or pity. They were watching because I was genuinely beautiful, confident, alive in a way that demanded attention without asking for it. I caught Nathan's reflection in the mirror along the wall. His jaw was tight, his smile forced. Amanda stood beside him, looking less victorious than before. My silent presence was undoing their carefully planned narrative, piece by piece. When the song ended, I made my way back to my table, slightly breathless and genuinely happy. The elderly woman from earlier grasped my hand as I sat down. "My dear, you are absolutely radiant. I don't know what your story is, but whatever you've been through has made you into something quite remarkable." Her words hit me unexpectedly hard, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I blinked them back, not wanting to ruin my makeup, but her kindness touched something deep inside me. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know." Her husband nodded in agreement. "Our daughter went through something similar, a bad relationship that took years to recover from. But she's thriving now, just like you clearly are." I realized then that my transformation wasn't just visible to me. Other people could see it too, strangers who had no reason to lie, who saw me without my family's toxic filter. For years, I'd based my self-worth on what my mother thought, what Nathan thought, what my family reflected back to me. I'd let their distorted mirror define my reality. But sitting here, receiving genuine compliments from people who had no agenda, I understood something fundamental. My worth wasn't up for debate. It wasn't determined by their approval or disapproval. It simply existed, undeniable and real, whether they acknowledged it or not. I smiled genuinely for the first time all evening, feeling something shift permanently inside my chest. I was free. Dinner was served shortly after, plates of expensive food that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, engaging in pleasant conversation with my tablemates. From my position, I could see my family's table clearly. My mother kept glancing back, her expression growing more pinched with each passing minute. My stepfather looked bored, checking his phone repeatedly. Sarah was whispering urgently to the bridesmaid beside her, shooting dark looks in my direction. Then I heard it, voices rising slightly, cutting through the ambient dinner conversation. My mother was arguing with Sarah, trying to keep her voice low but failing. This was supposed to be simple. She was supposed to fall apart. Well, she's not falling apart, Aunt Claire. She looks like she's having a great time. Don't be ridiculous. She's putting on an act. You know how she is. Always desperate for attention. Listening to them unravel their own plan was oddly satisfying. I took another sip of water, completely calm, while they grew more agitated trying to understand why their manipulation wasn't working. My stepfather said something I couldn't quite hear, and my mother snapped at him. Even from this distance, I could see the cracks forming in their united front. Their carefully constructed narrative was crumbling, and I hadn't even done anything except exist peacefully. The power shift was subtle but undeniable. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one scrambling to manage their emotions or fix their problems. I was simply being myself, and that was destroying them. An unexpected ally emerged during dessert. Mrs. Harrison, an old friend of my mother's I'd known since childhood, approached my table with a gentle smile. "Chloe, dear, might I have a word?" We stepped away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner near the garden doors. Mrs. Harrison had always been kind to me, one of the few adults in my mother's circle who treated me like I mattered. "I probably shouldn't say this," she began, glancing back at my mother's table, "but I've watched your family's treatment of you for years, and it's troubled me greatly." I stayed quiet, letting her continue. "Your mother has always favored your brother, always made excuses for his behavior while holding you to impossible standards. I've tried to say something before, but she doesn't take criticism well." Mrs. Harrison sighed deeply. "It's caused talk, you know. People have noticed. The favoritism, the way she treats you versus how she treats him. It's hurt her reputation more than she realizes." This information landed like a gift I hadn't known I needed. My mother's power, the social standing she valued so highly, was already eroding. Not because of anything I'd done, but because truth has a way of revealing itself. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone believes her narrative about you," Mrs. Harrison continued. "Some of us see you clearly, a strong, intelligent, beautiful young woman who deserves so much better than how she's been treated." I hugged her impulsively, grateful for her courage in speaking up. As she walked away, I felt another piece of my mother's control crumble to dust. I was checking my phone when the text came through, from Jessica, but she'd forwarded it from someone else. The message preview made my stomach drop, and I opened the full thread. It was a screenshot of a group chat, dated 3 weeks ago, between Nathan and his groomsmen. The words were brutal in their honesty. "Nathan, can't wait for Chloe to see what she lost. This wedding is basically my victory lap." Groomsmen. Dude, isn't that kind of harsh? Nathan, she was always too needy anyway. Amanda knows how to let me breathe. Plus, having Chloe there to watch me win is just chef's kiss. Another groomsman, "You're terrible, man. But I respect the pettiness." I stared at the screen, reading it twice, 3 times. The humiliation had been planned down to the finest detail. This entire wedding wasn't about love, it was about Nathan's ego, about proving something to himself and everyone else. Jessica had added her own message, "Thought you should know what you're dealing with. You okay?" I looked up from my phone, across the reception hall to where Nathan stood talking with guests, his arm around Amanda. For a moment, I felt the old anger rising, the familiar sting of betrayal. Then something else replaced it, clarity. Nathan needed this victory because he was small. Because his sense of self-worth was so fragile that he needed to publicly humiliate an ex-girlfriend just to feel powerful. I was untouchable now. Not because I was perfect or had somehow won, but because I genuinely didn't need his approval anymore. I texted Jessica back, "I'm more than okay. I'm free." As the evening progressed, the tension in the room became almost tangible. My mother kept fidgeting with her napkin, folding and refolding it into smaller squares. Sarah had given up on subtlety and was openly glaring at me from across the room. Nathan's smile had become permanently fixed, his jaw tight every time someone glanced my way. Amanda sensed something was wrong. I watched her lean in to whisper to Nathan several times, her expression growing more anxious with each conversation. He'd pat her hand dismissively, but his eyes kept finding me. I remained exactly as I'd been all evening. Calm, composed, sipping my champagne slowly, engaging in pleasant conversation with the genuinely nice people around me. My stepfather had abandoned the reception entirely, probably finding a quiet corner to drink in peace away from the building drama. The cracks in their plan were showing clearly now. This was supposed to be Nathan's moment of triumph, my moment of humiliation. Instead, I was the picture of grace while everyone else slowly unraveled. An older gentleman stopped by my table, someone I vaguely recognized as Nathan's uncle. "You're Chloe, aren't you? Nathan's mentioned you." I nodded politely. "Used to date, yes." He studied me for a moment, then smiled warmly. "Well, I don't know what happened between you two, but I'd say he made a mistake letting you go. You carry yourself with remarkable dignity." As he walked away, I caught Nathan watching the interaction, his expression unreadable. The room admired what he'd thrown away, and he knew it. The moment came during the final toast, when the best man invited anyone who wanted to say a few words to stand and share. I watched several people speak, friends telling embarrassing stories, family members offering advice, all the usual wedding fare. Then the best man's eyes found mine across the room. "Anyone else want to add something before we close out the evening?" The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me, waiting, expecting either drama or a tearful breakdown. My mother leaned forward in her seat, Sarah gripped her champagne glass, Nathan's whole body tensed. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. The walk to the front of the room felt like miles, every eye tracking my movement. When I reached the microphone, I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "Thank you for letting me share," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I'm not here to cause problems or make this about me. I just want to say that growth often comes from unexpected places." I let my eyes drift to Nathan, then back to the crowd. Sometimes we outgrow relationships, and that's okay. It's part of becoming who we're meant to be. I hope Nathan and Amanda find happiness together. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. And I'm grateful for the journey that brought me here today, not to this wedding specifically, but to this version of myself. Someone who knows her worth, who doesn't shrink to make others comfortable, who understands that being called too much by the wrong people just means you're exactly enough for the right ones. The room was completely silent. So here's my toast, to growth, to self-discovery, and to never letting anyone convince you that you're less than you are. Congratulations to the happy couple. I raised my glass, smiled genuinely, and returned to my seat in absolute silence. The aftermath of my speech rippled through the room like a stone dropped in still water. Nathan stood frozen, his face pale, unable to find words to respond. Amanda whispered something urgent in his ear, her expression no longer triumphant but worried. My mother's mouth hung slightly open, shock written across her features. She'd expected tears or anger, not eloquent composure. Sarah looked confused, like she couldn't quite process what had just happened. But everyone else? The guests who didn't know our history, who hadn't been part of this orchestrated humiliation, they were nodding, some even dabbing at their eyes. An older woman near the front actually started clapping, and others joined in. The applause wasn't loud or overwhelming, but it was genuine. They'd heard wisdom in my words, seen grace in my delivery. I'd exposed Nathan's immaturity without ever naming it directly. I'd shown my family's toxicity by contrast. Their bitterness against my composure, their need to diminish me against my refusal to shrink. Nathan attempted to laugh it off, making some joke about ex-girlfriends and moving on, but his voice cracked slightly. Nobody laughed with him. The best man quickly moved to another toast, trying to regain control of the moment, but the damage was done. Or rather, the truth was revealed. I sat back down at my table, hands trembling slightly with adrenaline, but my face calm. The elderly woman beside me squeezed my hand. "That was beautiful, dear. Absolutely beautiful." Nathan couldn't look at me anymore. His victory lap had turned into something else entirely, a public display of his own pettiness, exposed simply by my refusal to play the role he'd written for me. The wedding began winding down shortly after, guests filtering toward the exits, thanking the bride and groom, collecting favors and saying goodbyes. I gathered my small clutch and stood, taking one last look around the reception hall. My mother approached, her face a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like fear. "Chloe, that speech was completely inappropriate. You made this all about yourself." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I'd spent my entire life trying to please, trying to be enough for, trying to earn love from. Someone who would never give me what I needed because she was fundamentally incapable of it. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mom," I said calmly. "I hope you have a good evening." I walked past her without waiting for a response, past Sarah who looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words, past my stepfather who avoided eye contact entirely. Nathan stood near the exit, and for a brief moment, our eyes met. I saw everything in his expression. Regret, confusion, the dawning realization that his plan had backfired spectacularly. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the night air was cool and clean, washing away the stuffiness of the reception hall. I walked toward my car, my heels clicking against pavement, my emerald dress flowing behind me like a cape. My phone buzzed, Jessica and my friends confirming our dinner reservation, asking how it went, sending heart emojis and strength. I smiled, genuinely happy, genuinely free. I'd walked into that wedding as the woman they expected to see broken. I walked out as someone entirely different, someone who knew her worth, who refused to be diminished, who understood that the best revenge wasn't cruelty or drama. It was simply becoming so completely, undeniably yourself that their narrative couldn't touch you. The dress wasn't just fabric and thread. It was a symbol of everything I'd reclaimed, my dignity, my confidence, my life. As I drove away from that estate, I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth seeing anymore. Only forward, toward the life I was building on my own terms, surrounded by people who saw me clearly and loved me anyway. Nathan and my family could keep their toxic games, their need for control, their desperate attempts to feel superior by tearing others down. I was done playing. I'd already won by walking away from a game that was rigged from the start. The woman in the emerald dress wasn't the girl they'd tried to destroy. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone finally, beautifully free.